Hi everyone, I'm Any New Province, and this week we're playing Rug Madness for Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefits of net decking in Pauper. Madness is an archetype in Pauper that pops up every now and then as a somewhat popular fringe archetype. It hasn't broken through in a while, but active community member and generally all around nice person Socks of Grandeur managed to break through and use this Rug Madness deck to take down an event at their LGS. Madness is a keyworded ability that triggers when you discard a card that has madness. For that reason, this deck is running a ton of discard outlets. First, I'm going to go over Socks of Grandeur's creature-based discard outlets, starting with Looter Ilkor. It costs 1 and a blue for a 1/1 with Shadow, which means this creature can block or be blocked by only creatures with Shadow. Whenever Looter Ilkor deals damage to an opponent, you draw a card, then discard a card. Looting is a powerful ability on its own. For that reason, you should always loot, but maybe that's a discussion for another time. In this deck, it not only allows us to filter our draws, it also enables all of the madness spells we have in our deck. Next, we have Borderland Explorer, which costs 1 and a green for a 3/1 elf scout, and when it enters the battlefield, each player may discard a card. Each player who discarded a card this way may search their library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into their hand, then shuffle their library. Getting a 3/1 this early in the game is usually a great thing, and sometimes worth it to give your opponent an extra card, especially if we can get some madness value out of the card we discard. We're also running Insolent Neonate, which costs 1 red for a 1/1 with Menace, which means this creature can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. You can discard a card, sacrifice Insolent Neonate to draw a new card. Again, Insolent Neonate is just a great way to filter our draws on its own, and if we can get a little bit of extra value out of the card we discard, all the better. It's great too that Insolent Neonate can sometimes attack around your opponent's single blocker if they're trying to stall the board out. Next, we have our non-creature based discard outlets, starting with Lightning Axe. It costs 1 red mana for an instant, and as an additional cost to cast this spell, you have to discard a card or pay 5 generic mana, which probably won't come up that often, but might. Lightning Axe deals 5 damage to target creature. While discarding a card can be a heavy cost for decks that aren't built around it, Lightning Axe deals that crucial amount of damage to kill a Gurmag Angler. I'm super happy to have this kind of removal spell in this deck. We're also running 4 copies of Faithless Looting, which costs 1 mana for a sorcery that allows you to draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, which wouldn't be that great unless Faithless Looting had the flashback ability, which costs 2 and a red. You can cast it again from your graveyard for that cost and then exile it. Next, we have our Madness Payoffs, the spells that Socks of Grandeur built around to really give this deck a lot of value out of discarding cards. This package starts with Fiery Temper. We're also running 4 copies of Basking Rootwalla, everyone's favorite madness threat. It costs 1 green mana for a 1/1, but you can also pay 1 and a green to get Basking Rootwalla +2/+2 until end of turn. You can only activate this ability once per turn, but you're going to have a 3/3 at that point. Who needs to activate it again? Basking Rootwalla also has the madness ability, but you don't have to pay for Basking Rootwalla's madness cost. It's just 0 generic mana. If you discard it, you get a free Rootwalla. Next up, we have a ton of spells that just synergize well with the graveyard, either being in the graveyard and still being active, or taking advantage of all the cards we're going to be putting into our graveyard with our discard outlets. First, we have Moldervine Cloak, which costs 2 and a green for an enchantment that gives enchanted creature +3/+3. But the interesting thing about Moldervine Cloak is that it has Dredge 2, which means if you would draw a card, instead you may put exactly 2 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. If you do, return Moldervine Cloak from the graveyard to your hand. Otherwise, draw a card. Next up, we have Hooting Mandrills, which costs 5 and a green, although we'll probably never pay that because Hooting Mandrills has the Delve ability, which means each card you exile from your graveyard while casting Hooting Mandrills pays for 1 generic mana in its mana cost. It's a 4/4 with trample. We're going to be able to power out Hooting Mandrills fairly early by dredging cards with our Moldervine Cloak or putting them there with any of our discard outlets. It's a 4/4 threat, and once we've removed Gurmag Anglers with our Lightning Axes, that should attack through just about anything. Next up, we have Firebolt, which costs 1 red mana for a sorcery and deals 2 damage to any target, which would be pretty anemic, but it has the flashback ability to give us that little bit of extra extra graveyard synergy, and an extra activation of Firebolt for just 4 generic mana and a red. We're also running 2 copies of Deep Analysis, which costs 3 generic mana and a blue for a sorcery that allows target player to draw 2 cards. It also has the flashback ability for 1 and a blue and 3 life. Deep Analysis is such a powerful card that Luis Scott Vargas once substituted all of the Storm cards in his Storm decks for Deep Analysis. He did win a lot of matches, but I still think it was kind of a mistake. Anyway, Deep Analysis is just an excellent card advantage spell, and it makes a lot of sense to have it in here because you can still cast it from your graveyard. To go along with our Deep Analysis, we have Preordain as a little bit of extra card filtering. It costs 1 blue mana for a sorcery that allows you to scry 2, then draw a card. We're running a little bit more interaction in this deck, even though it doesn't synergize with our graveyard. They're just great removal spells to include in any deck that runs mountains. First, we have a main board copy of Electrickery, a great inclusion. It's an instant that costs 1 red mana to deal 1 damage to target creature you don't control, which seems really bad, but Electrickery has the overload ability, which means you can pay 1 and a red and cast this spell for its overload cost. If you do, you change its text by replacing all instances of target with each, meaning you can wipe the board of all the X1s on your opponent's side. Electrickery is just a great way to hedge against decks like Boros Monarch with all of their Battle Screech tokens, or Elves with all of their super important X1s. It's even a way that you can blow out Delver decks by killing their spell stutter sprites while the counter trigger is still on the stack. It's just awesome to have a single main deck copy to dig to. Finally, our last non-land card is Lightning Bolt, one of the best removal and burn spells in the Pauper format. It costs 1 red mana for an instant that deals 3 damage to any target. Alright, let's have a look at this mana base, and like any 3-color mana base in the Pauper format, it's certainly a doozy. First, we have 2 copies of Evolving Wilds, which you can tap and sacrifice to search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. We're running 4 copies of Rugged Highlands, your standard Pauper duels in red and green. They enter the battlefield tapped. When they enter battlefield, they gain you a life. When they're untapped, you can tap them for green or red. Swiftwater Cliffs are pretty much the same as Rugged Highlands, only they add blue and red. For our basics, we have 2 forests, 2 islands, and 8 mountains. A ton of untapped red mana to start Faithless Looting right away, and only enough basics in our other colors to fetch out of our deck with Borderland Explorer when we're still trying to fix our mana. Alright, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we have another copy of Lightning Axe for dealing with anglers or similar sized creatures. We have a single copy of Pillage that's good against Affinity and Tron. We have a copy of Spider Silk Armor to protect our own X1s from wraths like Electrickery. We have a single copy of Jilt for a good 2-for-1 bouncing an angler and killing a Delver. We have 2 copies of Muldrifter for grinding it out against decks and drawing more cards that they can handle. We have Fairy Macabre for instant speed graveyard hate, 2 Pulse of Marasas for getting things out of our graveyard against graveyard hate. We have 2 copies of Blazing Volley for wiping the board of X1s if our main deck Electrickery doesn't come through, 2 copies of Ancient Grudge for wiping the board of artifacts if Pillage doesn't do it, and 2 copies of Tranquility for destroying all of Boggle's enchantments, or if we run into something like Mono White Heroic. And there you have it, Rug Madness by Socks of Grandeur. Congratulations on taking down the event at your LGS, Socks. We're going to take this deck into a league on Magic Online at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time. We're there every Wednesday night playing competitive Pauper decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Wednesday night.